Disclaimer. This podcast features a conversation between two individuals regarding assistive technology. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed during this episode belong solely to the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. Furthermore, this discussion is for informational purposes only.
Hi, welcome to Assistive Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Lavodi, and today we have a special guest, Jack Kavanagh, who is the non-executive director of Move the Needle, and he's coming across from the pond, so to speak, in Ireland. And Jack, welcome to Assistive Tech Today podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. As we said, I'm dialing in from Ireland, so maybe able to offer some European perspectives on what's going on and how I use assistive tech in my own life.
Yeah, so Jack and I had met on LinkedIn, and we had a few message conversations. And I said, Jack, I think it would be great for my viewers and listeners to have you on, like you said, to give your perspective on assistive technology. So I guess we'll let you just tell your story, how you wind up, being where you are today.
Yeah, well, I often think to know me now, you need to know a little bit about me from before. Um, and growing up, I was like very much an active kid. Involved in all kinds of sports and activities. And then I got to school and pretty quickly the phone calls home started. And over the first couple of years, I think a big issue that I had was with being disciplined for being disruptive and not being able to pay attention and things like that. And around the age of 8, I got diagnosed as being severely dyslexic. At that time, I had a reading age 2 years behind my peers, and I think over the next couple of years, I met a different type of teacher that really empowered me and taught me new ways to learn with a different style of learning. And I suppose that was my first exposure to difference in any kind of way or a different style of learning. I went through my teenage years all good, a really active person, massively interested in the outdoors and I loved different adventure sports from a family holiday skiing, but particularly sailing and in my latter years windsurfing and surfing. And I used to spend my summers working as an instructor in the west of Ireland in this really wild environment. And then age 20, having spent the summer down the west instructing, I went away on a holiday to Portugal with some of my closest friends on the first day, had a great run in the morning and found a brilliant beach, and we spent the day on the beach, and I went for one more swim at the end of that day, and I ran down the beach, dived into the water over a wave, and I just didn't anticipate how shallow it was, and my head collided with a sandbank, and I broke and dislocated the fifth vertebrae in my neck. Um, in this world that I kind of knew how to navigate as a young adult was dramatically changed. At the time, I was just about to go into my second year studying pharmacy in college, um, and things took a bit of a different turn. I spent the next 28 days in intensive care, the next 28 after being air ambulanced back to Ireland in a high dependency unit. I was fully ventilator dependent for like 49 days, and then
Uh,
I spent 7.5 months in the National Rehab Unit in Ireland, just on the south side of Dublin. And I came to understand that I had a spinal cord injury, that I had about 15% muscle function remaining. So that was my shoulders, my biceps, and my wrists. I didn't have any finger function or use of my triceps, and I didn't have any function below my armpits. And so my diagnosis was a C5-6 complete spinal cord injury, and that I was quadriplegic. And this was not the life I had planned, and yet you need to find new ways. And at the time, one of the big ambitions for me was to get back to college for the next academic year. And thankfully, I got back to college about 13 months after my injury and lived away from home over the course of the next number of years in college. And it was over those years that I really began to truly understand the value of appropriate assistive devices at appropriate times, and how they can really enhance your life. And um, I live a very full life now. My injury was almost 14 years ago, which is crazy. I went on and qualified as a pharmacist in the years after that. Became a non-executive director of the National Disability Authority in Ireland. And within that, they have the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design. And so for me, that's been hugely interesting, learning about and working with assistive or universal design and how that kind of impacts on how I think about assistive technology as well. And I set up my own company. As you said, it's called Move the Needle. And the idea with Move the Needle is I do a lot of keynote speaking and workshops related to sort of health and resilience and leadership. But increasingly, Move the Needle has taken on projects that do just that, just move the needle in their chosen area. And so I've worked quite a bit with the World Health Organization, and currently involved with them on a project they're doing with the Irish government around workforce optimization and assistive technology. So it's like, how can we leverage emerging assistive technology to optimize what is a diminishing healthcare workforce in Western countries while we have aging populations and people living for longer with both disabilities from birth and acquired disabilities. Um, and how can we prolong and enhance their independence to the greatest extent possible? And so that's one piece of the puzzle. But in my the rest of my life, like the adventurous nature never left me. And more than anything, assistive technology has empowered me personally, whether it be to get back driving, to use a manual wheelchair, with various different attachments that allow me to really enhance my independence, um, hand cycles, off-roading bikes, these types of things, that really allow me to live a very full life. And then simple assistive tech adaptations that make me very functional, using technology from my phone to my laptop, to accommodate sort of the functional deficits that I currently have with my injury. So I've said a lot, and I'd love to let you back in, Vinny, but
Sure.
you can let me know what resonates and where you'd like to take it.
Yeah, no, that's, that's an amazing story. And, you turn that, you know, terrible accident into something positive to help other people, again, to expose them to assistive technology. My last guest was Ignatius Montoyo, and he was also he was a full spinal cord injury, and he was working in Georgia Tech, and he was going to be a pilot in the Air Force, and he wound up getting his degree in medical engineering, but he used an ectoskeleton and he was able to walk with the two different type of ectoskeletons, but he wound up changing his diagnosis from a full spinal cord to a partial to an incomplete, which is amazing. But again, like you just, you hit on the point that there's so much assistive technology today to make, to minimize, you know, would stop you maybe 10 years ago. You wouldn't be able to do some of the things that you're able to do now to allow you to live a more, a more full life, a more complete life, and more independent life, which we didn't have this technology, like I said, even 10 years ago. And I think everybody talks about AI. I think that's also been a huge driving force. And I was always a tech junkie. I've done a lot of consumer tech stuff, and I always credit the mobile tech market as moving a lot of stuff forward to making it smaller, faster, more compact, totally adaptable to assistive technology that we didn't have, things that were bulky and big that didn't make sense. Now we have, the power in our phone, with high speed internet, it can do so many things, and there's so many possibilities with assistive tech. So, but I guess I'd like to learn a little bit more about, moving the needle. You said, I know you worked with the World Health Organization. Are they mostly just in Europe? Is it pretty much primarily in Europe or in the UK?
Yeah, so my work with them has been on European projects and now with their relationship in Ireland. And one of the amazing things I got to do as part of that was I went on a tour to Norway. And in Norway they have a really interesting way of thinking about provision of assistive technologies. And they really think about citizenship in Norway, and that as you age and go through your life, that your requirements as a citizen change, as you maybe have age-related decline or acquisition of disabilities, or maybe you acquire disability at a younger age like I did. But they have this amazing process of considering the citizen and how do we keep that person engaged in society in a meaningful way such that they can continue to contribute, but also that they have the right tech at the right time to empower them. And so, if you take someone like me, if I lived in Norway, when I had my injury, I would, get my base wheelchair that might be highly adaptable until I configured my settings to get to a place where I knew what I needed um, to be most functional and to support my posture and so on. And that would then be converted to a bespoke wheelchair with those exact dimensions. But the beautiful thing about their system is that first wheelchair that's highly configurable would be recycled and used for someone else. So about 60% of their assistive tech, both physical and technological, is recycled. Um, which is amazing. And they do really timely interventions. So if I, for example, loved to mountain bike previously, they'll supply me with a mountain bike for summer sports and a sit ski for winter sports. They'll support me with dictation software so that I can return to college or personal assistant services and things like that. And the whole point of providing these supports up front is that you reduce the lag time between someone wanting to engage and being able to engage. And with that, you really empower the individual. And what we know from the Global Report on Assistive Technology, which is a World Health Organization publication, is that the return on investment is somewhere between 8 and 9 to 1. So for every euro or dollar you spend on assistive technology, the return on investment is about 8 to 9 euros or dollars. And that's really quite profound because you take someone and who otherwise has a functional um, disability or cognitive disability and is in some way impaired by that, and you lower that threshold, or lower the barrier to allow them to remain involved in society. And we know how big that is because, you provide someone with a wheelchair and pressure care support, um, so that their body is safe, and their skin integrity is good, and they've got mobility to get out there in the world. And all of a sudden you start to eradicate mental health or hospital stay costs because they've got the right things. You give someone the tech that they need to get back into the workforce or into education, and you completely change their horizons. And so, my work with Move the Needle has really been about taking on different projects in different places, and bringing both sort of the healthcare background that I've got plus the lived experience elements that I have, to provide sort of unique insight that takes, the life course lens of healthcare plus the lived experience of disability, exposure to policy through WHO and my work on the National Disability Authority, and then that universal design approach. So it's thinking about when we're procuring or designing equipment or technology or websites or physical spaces, how do we do it with the broadest um, range of sort of society, and how people present across their life in mind. And I think when you do some of those things in design and provision, actually you just enable people to stay active in society.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is definitely like a forward way of thinking. It just makes so much sense on so many levels. I don't know if it's that same, here in the US. There is a lot of technology here, and I talk to people from all over the world, so I do get different perspectives, uh, even with the healthcare systems, in from the United States to Europe, things are looked at differently. But, one thing that everybody can agree on, just like when with special education, early intervention, the faster you can address early intervention, if somebody has some type of disability, the better the outcome, the better they'll, for most cases. And same thing with injuries. Like when I was talking to my last guest, Ignacio, he was saying, they were going to basically just let him sit there because he had a complete spinal cord injury that, there was really nothing they could do for him, and he didn't accept that. But he rehabbed, and he was able to he moved the needle, like you said, moving the needle. It made a difference. You became an advocate because of your own personal experience to move things forward and basically put light on things. And your organization and others like it is really tremendous. And I think with all the tech that we have today, there's no reason why people can't live, a complete life and do things that they had wanted or intended on doing.
Yeah, well, I might just give you an example just from my personal life, of the range of assistive tech that I use, and so we emailed or messaged back and forth a little bit on LinkedIn
Right.
and by email. And for some of that, I used a very simple device. So I came out of rehab with typing splints. This was like 13 years ago.
Hmm.
And they were these things from the occupational therapy department. And they wrapped around my wrist and protruded out to support one of my fingers to type. And my immediate thought was, no way am I going to the library in college with that yoke. And so I was like, I stand out enough without that. And so I wanted something minimal and streamlined. So myself and my dad came up with this idea of taking um, a finger splint, so a plastic finger splint, um, um, and putting a rubberized piece on the top. So that's for anybody that can see it, you'll see the blue piece on top, but I'll
Yep.
describe it for anyone that can't. So I've got this finger splint that's plastic that I have got tape around in the center to make it fit my finger really snugly. Up at the top, I have what is actually a rubber thumb protector for
We say,
someone that's sewing.
yeah.
I have a little bit of Velcro on the back of it because I use that to attach it to my laptop when I'm putting my bag in and out of my bag, or my laptop in and out of my rucksack. The fingers don't drop on the floor. And then I can just slide this over my index finger and it straightens it out and allows me to two finger type. Now
Wow.
that's really useful in a noisy environment, but actually what I've really benefited from is, the inbuilt dictation software. Previously, I used Drag and Dictate, but when I would have been messaging you, if I was at home or in the office, I would have probably used the built-in dictation software in my Mac or my iPhone. More recently, however, I've moved over to an AI-based dictation software that is remarkably good. It's the best I've come across, called Whisper Flow.
Hmm.
And that is an example of how you can go from super, super low tech um, finger splints that allowed me to do all of my exams in college because I initially began with the finger splints. I couldn't type fast enough, so I would have to use primitive assistive dictation software, and it was so primitive that I couldn't understand the scientific language, and so I had to work on my typing speed. And I ended up typing all the exams in college using these type of finger
Wow.
splints. And now I've gone on as technology has evolved to adapt with that. And you've got these amazing dictation softwares like the built-in versions on Mac and on other applications, and more recently using WhisperFlow, and they're just like a very simple example that it doesn't always need to be high tech. I'm still using the low tech version in noisy environments where it wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak out loud in a cafe or something, or working in a shared environment. Um, and then I started to look at, the design of my wheelchair, and I was quite determined to use a manual wheelchair with my function and dexterity and so on. This was always going to be a challenge, and I'm quite proficient at pushing and managing my manual wheelchair indoors and in pretty flat environments outdoors. But the thing that made it possible for me was to use a manual wheelchair full time was to couple that with a bike attachment for the front of my chair. And so I use over the years, I've used what's called a street jet, and the newer version that I'm using is called the RehaSense Pause, and that clips onto the front of my wheelchair, and it's like a scooter that you see kids whipping around the place on
Hmm.
now. It's like a scooter for my wheelchair, and it attaches on, lifts my front caster wheels off the ground, and now I've got the front wheel of the scooter and my back two wheels, and I've got power. And
Do you
when
power
I
it with
got
your
my first,
hands? Do you power it
no,
like paddle it with?
you've got electric
It's
power.
electric. So it's like I was gonna say like a power assist.
Yeah, exactly. And so that thing changed the game for me when I lived in the city in particular. I could clip it on and have the city at my fingertips, and I've traveled the world with that, and it means that I don't need to rely on what might be inaccessible public transport when I get to new cities and things like that. And when I coupled that with an adapted vehicle, where I drive with hand controls, all of a sudden I went from a place where I was relatively independent in indoors and in relatively flat environments to a place where I could now drive the length and breadth of the country for work. and be independent navigating different environments when I got there, that I wouldn't be worried about the type of terrain that I'd come across. And so that quite literally gave me the potential to now work across the country independently. And it was down to a well-fitted wheelchair with the right power assist and an adapted vehicle. And all of a sudden, I go from a place of being in a very dependent mode to being a net contributor. And so you start to see where the 8 to 1 return on investment comes, because if I'm not out and about in the world, engaged and contributing and benefiting from both the return of that for myself, but also the value we all get from contributing and being involved. Um, all of a sudden, if I don't have access to that, it's a slippery slope. And that's where we start to see mental health challenges and people don't take care of themselves
Right.
in the same way and so on. And so, all of that started to give me confidence to explore other things. And I've now got like a hand bike that attaches to my wheelchair in a similar way, because my whole thing was, how can I lower the barrier to doing the sports and staying active in the greatest way I can. And my function doesn't allow me to easily transfer down into a recumbent hand cycle. And so I have one that attaches to my chair and I can pedal in my chair. And I've done huge mileage on that last year. I trained through the summer to take on a cycle along the Danube River route through Germany and Austria. And over 4 days, we did 380 kilometers.
Wow.
And so these things are hugely empowering for someone with quite a limited level of muscle function. You mentioned about the exoskeletons, which are the really high end of sort of assistive rehabilitative devices. And with my injury, I don't have residual connection in my spinal cord above and below the level in a way that I can actively control my lower body. But for 5 years, I walked every week in an exoskeleton, um, and now don't have access to that anymore. The program isn't running in the same way, but I stand every day I wake up at home. I stand in a standing frame and get some of the same benefits. And these things, although for me weren't restorative in terms of function, they were certainly maintaining body composition and bone health and all of these
Right.
kinds of things. And so there's layers and layers of different types of assistive tech, and the way that it can support you with or without disabilities. Like you're wearing glasses,
Right.
in the strict definition, that's an assistive device, you know?
Mm-hmm. True. I mean, it's so amazing. Like, when you were saying about your manual wheelchair, I mean, today they can build them so light and they're not cumbersome. And now you had that power assist. Whereas a power wheelchair, they're great and they can do some amazing thing. I've watched them go up staircases, but they are heavier, they're bulky. It's not something you probably could do, put in an assisted vehicle on your own. Most likely you would need somebody, or you're saying now you're pretty much independent. You're able to move around and also, just the movement to keep you out of, keep your body active because we're meant to move. No matter what anybody says, we're a body that is meant to move. And if you take that away from things stiffen up and they wear out just like anything else, just like an old car, if you don't drive it, it just things start breaking down even if you don't use it. And with that whole forward thinking, give them the assistive devices because it's a lot in the long run, it's definitely a lot cheaper. One, they're contributing. They're staying out of the hospital, so they have better quality of life. And I mean, hospital stays are not cheap. If somebody can't do anything, they have to stay in the hospital for months. That's going to cost, in the long run, it's going to cost way more than all the assistive probably devices that they could use and to keep themselves healthy and like I said, mental health, physical health. It's a whole. You have to look at it. Like when I was a kid learning how to drive, the instructor said you have to learn how to look at the big picture. You just can't look at the car ahead of you. You have to look at everything around you. Same philosophy. There's so many things that you need to look at, and there's so many pluses.
Um, so can I ask you a question then?
Sure.
You've been in this assistive technology world for a long time as well. Um, I've been in it sort of in it as a user, and as a sort of policy level advisor, and increasingly as a designer. You've been involved in providing solutions for all sorts of people. Um, what are the types of assistive technology that you've seen the greatest advances in?
So yes, I work for a company called Enabling Devices, and we've been around since roughly 1976, and I've been with them for 24 years, going on 25. Um, we started out doing light tech, very simple things like what you were showing with the finger splints, things like that. Very low tech or light tech communication, the AAC devices for young, early intervention, adaptive toys. But the biggest thing that I've seen, and I've talked a lot about on the podcast, is back when the iPad came out, it was a game changer for bringing somewhat fairly high tech to the masses, because everybody started having a smartphone, and it was an easy, intuitive tech to understand, because a lot of the assistive tech, some of the more advanced devices, is a learning curve involved in using it, and some people are not really good at it. If you have a family member who's your healthcare provider and they're not really tech savvy, the tech's great, but if somebody just gives up on it and says this is too hard to use, they don't use it, and then it's useless to them. So that was one of the biggest things I've seen. It accelerated things a lot in the mobile. Like I said, the mobile tech has helped a lot. And of course, now with AI, there is a lot of advancement with AI, and it's at an accelerated rate. Plus, we do a lot of 3D printing. 3D printing has been a game changer for us as a company, but it's also amazing because of rapid prototype development. I can
Mm,
custom make something for somebody, like we do a lot of custom work, whereas 5 years ago, I couldn't. We always did custom things where other companies didn't, but I couldn't do it at the level I could do it now because it was too involved. Like if I had to make a mold of something, somebody would have to hand carve out a mold in a material called Ren. And then if we had to form it with vacuum forming, which is what we used to do, and we still do some vacuum forming now, but you'd have to like mold a piece of plastic over this thing, over your mold, cut it out, and it's not going to be perfect because there's variances and tolerances can't be tight like an injection molded product. And injection molding is amazing, but to make an injection molded part, for a one-off it's not practical. I mean, a mold could cost you 25 to $100,000. And if something needs to be changed, you either maybe can modify that mold or have to start all over again. With 3D printing, you draw it on a computer. It's a CAD program or a SolidWorks program. You design it, and if it's not right, you go back and redo it. You can do a quick print in, a couple of hours or maybe an hour or two. You can have a rough print, and you can at least have something to work with. So for development, that's been a game changer, I think, 3D printing, and it's come a long way in the last. I met the guy who started MakerBot back in the day. I was involved in the tech industry, and I was at a tech show in New York City, and I introduced him. And at the time, it was emerging tech. It was okay. It was consumer level, but it wasn't there yet. But then just before COVID, we started getting involved in it, and the tech has really jumped. It's really been amazing what they can print. Carbon fiber, all type of very lightweight, strong material. So
yeah,
that's been the biggest thing.
there's a company in Europe called Make It Real, and they do incredible work with 3D printing. And I was involved for about a year with a project around 3D printing wheelchair cushions that are completely shape matched to the person's shape. And like you said previously, they would have been molds that would have been taken and then cut out. in foam, whereas now you've got um, the potential to 3D print it and vary the densities in the lattice and so on, and do amazing bespoke seating solutions for people.
Right.
So 3D printing is a game changer.
Plus with the technology with AI, they can do like body scan. Like there's so much stuff they can scan now to get really accurate measurements. Like where you said you'd have to take a mold and put the person in there. Because I know I have a friend that works for United Cerebral Palsy in Westchester. He's been on the podcast and he was showing me when some of the kids were getting fitted for wheelchairs, they needed braces and things. And it was a pretty tedious process to do this. And then they have to fit them. So yes, 3D printing and some of the technology that's out there would make that stuff bring the cost down and make it more affordable and also make it quicker. And I just want to make note, we're almost out of time, but and I could always have you back on if you're game, Jack, because you had some interesting stuff to talk about. Is there anything you want to share with the viewers and listeners before we wrap this up? And as always, guys, anything that Jack that was important, that we'll always put it in the show notes so you can follow up on it and see all the amazing stuff that Jack was talking about.
Um, yeah, I think look, the for me the space that's most exciting at the moment is the adaptive outdoors equipment, and I've always been adventurous in nature, and for me, um, I have my hand bike, yes, but I recently got an Exotech Exo Quad, and that thing has allowed me to get to places in the mountains and beach environments that I never thought would be possible again, and it's been a real force multiplier for my life and my lifestyle. And so I think the likes of what Exotech are doing, and a number of other companies in North America, and other locations through Europe is quite remarkable in the adventures that it opens up for people. And I think for me, that adventurous spirit never left me. It was just a matter of finding the right equipment or designing the right equipment to continue that. And I'd say for anyone that tunes into this, don't let any of those dreams that you might have for where you might be able to go, what you might be able to do to die, because assistive technology is there, and if it's not currently there, get involved in creating it.
Right. That's a powerful message, Jack, and it's a good one. And I'm going to end it on that. So, guys, as we say, another one in the books. I've been your host, Vinny Lavodi, for Assistive Tech Today podcast. Jack Kavanagh, thank you so much for being a guest on today's podcast. And everyone, be well, and we'll see you all on the next podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, Vinny.
Cheers.